Well, oh my. Hello, everyone. A little bit of an unexpected turn of events that has kind of turned the scheduling upside down. But, well, one thing's the same. We're still here at 9 o'clock, like we said we were. Well, we're not going to be talking about P. Diddy, except for, well, I just did say the words P. Diddy. Well, tomorrow, I promise to bring you all up to date on everything that's going over there. We are in verdict watch. They have the state rested, the defense rested. We had closing arguments. We had rebuttal. We had jury instructions. And we had hoopla today. Hoopla, hoopla. We'll talk all about that tomorrow because while all that was going on, and I was actually getting ready to talk about Bryan Kohberger tomorrow because he did have a hearing in PA and we did have the actual decisions from the last hearing that we discussed it about him last week. Well, he just really surprised me and possibly everybody else out here because the prosecution offered Bryan Kohberger a plea deal and rumor has it he has accepted. Bryan Kohberger intends to plead guilty to all four murders and the burglary charge in exchange to not having to face the death penalty. Wow, I didn't see that coming. Basically, the debate on Bryan Kohberger has been that there's really not a lot of evidence. It's all speculative. It's all, you know, could be like fought away with coincidental or just, circumstantial. And I have said all along that the digital data was really hard to dismiss. And apparently, Bryan Kohberger thinks so also. And I have to give his defense credit. They have thrown everything at the wall they can, hoping something would stick. All the way back to fighting how his name came out of the prosecution's mouth with the with the DNA testing, with the genetic testing. And this case was scheduled to be a landmark in genetic testing testifying, in actually confirming the viability of it and setting a path for other prosecutors and investigators to actually use this type of testing in narrowing down a possible suspect pool. Well, if there's a plea, well, that ain't going to happen. Because if a plea happens, there won't be a trial. Hey, Garris, do you think it has anything to do with the news expose was watched a couple of weeks ago? Well, let's get into that, Garris, because yes, I do. Yes, I do. Because the more that came out, I think even the defense was quite surprised at so many information that was leaked in that Dateline episode. And the judge was really upset. But it did come about that there were more witnesses. After all, we now have the DoorDash driver, okay, identified, affidavit, speculation that she may have saw him. But, from all of the filings that I've seen, the only one that was mentioned to have seen Bryan Kohberger at the murder scene was the roommate, the one who testified to the man in black with the bushy eyebrows. Well, I have to say, the defense has had an uphill climb since they went and threw everything they could to get this trial moved, this whole case moved out of county because of prejudicial. They did that big survey. They went toe to toe with the court system. And they got their change of venue. But with it came a new judge, Judge Hippler. And Judge Hippler, his rulings, although fair and based on law, have not really gone to the defense's benefit in any way whatsoever. He allowed the testing, the DNA testing, not the DNA testing, but the DNA sorting in the way that they actually identified Bryan Kohberger through genealogy testing to narrow the actual suspect pool. Uh, all coming in based on the science, was going to be a presidential case, a precedent stating case, because of that. He also denied every single continuation request, saying you've had plenty of time. Spend more time on your case and less time trying to get it moved. Yeah. Thousands of pages of motions that he had to go through, where they tried to throw out every single piece of evidence based on a couple of words that a law enforcement officer didn't state. I mean, excellent attorneys doing everything they can not to have Bryan Kohberger sit trial in front of a jury. And for them, this is a win, getting a plea deal, because he won't have to face a jury where they will judge him on every act. I mean, remember, they actually brought forth his status as an autistic adult, saying that the jury would judge him too harshly, especially if found guilty, because of his mannerisms, because of his demeanor, because of things he can't help. It's almost as if they knew they were really had a big mountain to climb, the defense, in as far as not getting a guilty verdict. Now, a lot of people have said there's really not a lot of evidence here. But when you put it all together, there actually is. And I think that this is actually the best opportunity, Mrs. Cassandra asked, did Idaho just pass a new bill on the death penalty? I have to look, but it is actually, they passed one a while back, allowing the firing squad. And I think that that's a scary prospect for anybody. I'll have to just double check that. Is we are going to have a live hearing on Wednesday. I'm hoping that it will allow media coverage, but Wednesday at 11 o'clock Pacific time in Idaho. That's 2 p.m. here on the East Coast. There's going to be the plea hearing, because this has all just been stated that he's going to accept. He has to formally do it in court, and the judge has to agree it's the best course of action. But let's just get to some of this other presentation that I have for you on it here, because there's more. There's definitely more. So we all know that Bryan is charged with first-degree murder, 4 charges of first-degree murder for the Idaho 4 university students murdered in their home, in their bedrooms, in very early hours of the morning, back on November 13th of 2022. He's also charged with burglary, breaking and entering into that home. Now, the prosecution has sought the death penalty from the start. And that's been a battle back and forth between the defense and the prosecution all along. And, well, the defense has lost that battle every step of the way. There's a gag order currently in place that there's a lot going on about. Now, Judge Hippler, when he took over the case, he actually released some of that gag order that Judge had in fact put on there. And he let it a little, he didn't understand why everything was so hush. But then after going through a lot of the filings and seeing what the defense was actually filing, he kind of understood why some of it had to be. And he reinstated that gag order, and he made it even tighter against everybody involved. Unfortunately, someone didn't take that very seriously. And there was new evidence, information, not new generally to the case, but new to all of us out here, that was released during the Dateline segment that was just on the Bryan Kohberger case. And that caused a lot in the court. Judge Hippler was very upset and said he would actually start an investigation to find out who it was, and that sanctions would be coming, and that he would actually put contempt. And he didn't take kindly to his orders being dismissed in such a way. The defense also used this leak to say why they needed a continuation, because it needed to be investigated, and that there was a book and another documentary coming out, and this was way too prejudicial, that they needed time to be able to deal with it. But Judge Hippler has recently said, sorry, Miss Taylor, sorry, Bryan Kohberger and your defense team, but we're going to trial in August. I'm going to give you 1 more week of preparation. I'll move jury selection to the 11th instead of around the 2nd, okay? Because we are moving forward. They also denied the removal of the death penalty. It stayed. Prosecution had enough in the egregiousness of the crime based on Idaho state law that they could go forward. And to answer your question, Mrs. Cassandra, I don't see anything changing the fact that he would have faced the death penalty. There's been nothing that would affect this case so far, but I'll dig into it a little more. The most recent filing on the death penalty state changes has been that they allowed the firing squad because they were having difficulty acquiring the medications for lethal injection. Because of the actual debate, the ongoing moral and justice debate on whether the death penalty should even be an option or a viable option in any state, the companies that manufacture those drugs have made them a little more difficult to get a hold of, not wanting to be part of any part of this debate one way or the other. So it's been difficult. And also, there are many groups that organize against any death penalty assigning or actually moving forward with it. There's plenty of options for those who are convicted under the death penalty to have it delayed. It takes forever, a long, long time for it to actually come to that. Some people say that living under that, knowing that you're going to die, but not knowing when for years and years, is cruel and unusual punishment. One of the arguments that they use. Still, some states do have the death penalty, and that's the law. So, Idaho, in order to actually implement their law, added the firing squad so that it could not delay even further by not being able to acquire the medications necessary. Chad Daybell may face the firing squad. That is the most recent conviction that I know of for the death penalty in the state of Idaho. Now, yep. Hey Liz, how you doing? Okay, so let's get to some more details about these. First of all, we must actually, in all due respect, acknowledge the 4 victims in this case. You know, there's Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Carnotto, Madison Morgan, and Ethan Chapin, all in their 20s. All did not deserve this at all. And I must say, their families are extremely, at least 2 of the families that I know of so far from reporting, the Gonzalez family and the aunt of Xana Carnotto, are extremely upset that a plea deal is going forth. Although they are glad that he admits to being guilty. They wanted the death penalty and they've been fighting. They don't think the plea deal is in their best interest. And they are saying they're going to fight it. Unfortunately, they don't get to stop it. It's up to the judge. In our justice system, we do hear the victims. They have every right to be heard for sentencing and for everything. And they are actually informed. But I don't think that they can actually stop it. We'll have to see what happens on July 2nd. Judge Hippler can take any petition that they file, any statements that they make into consideration. He can. But he's got to balance the rights of the victim versus the people, the state, and their rights to actually have a conviction without the extraordinary costs of a trial. Now, it doesn't seem fair. They wanted the day in court. But here's the thing. Based on what the judge says, he can make Bryan Kohberger allocute to everything that he did so that they get the peace of mind and they know that it was him. They can, based on what will be necessary to allocate to the crime, to make sure that he's of the state of mind that he knows exactly what he is pleading guilty to. Allocution and admission and the ability to actually show some remorse, apologies to the families, etc., is part of the process. But we're going to have to see on July 2nd if the court will even accept the plea. Because just because the prosecution offered, and just because the defense and Bryan Kohberger are very interested in accepting, it is not up to them whether it goes forward. It will be in the hands of Judge Hippler on Wednesday. And that we'll have to wait and see. These young people deserve justice. Justice doesn't always come the way we think. And although many of us were interested in this trial, that might not have been justice for the victims. It would have been entertainment for us, yes. But would it be justice for the people? Would it be justice for the victims? Let's talk about the plea deal. They are reporting that the plea deal includes life in prison, no opportunity for parole at all. He'll never get out. Also includes no right to appeal. But it's depending that formal hearing on Wednesday in Idaho. And we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And I find it interesting that this plea deal is coming on the day that we had the Pennsylvania hearings. About 7 of the witnesses that from Pennsylvania, where Bryan Kohberger grew up, where his family lives, they don't want to testify, that are having to be subpoenaed. Several of them were approved to go forward today, and several of them were rescheduled. And one of them's going to have a hearing because it's a family. It's actually the place that he bought the Elantra, the Hyundai, the vehicle he used to get to the crime scene, allegedly, where he bought it, and whether or not they were trying to sell it, the family afterwards, seems to be the speculation for the defense and the prosecution in regards to it. But unfortunately, the owner of that business is an 88-year-old man who no longer can testify. He's bedridden. And it's his son that's being subpoenaed, and he doesn't really know much about Bryan Kohberger or the transaction. So he's fighting it, saying he doesn't have anything to offer in testimony. So there'll be some type of hearing in regards to how those records will be presented and etc. if there were a trial. All of that is still going on until the formal acceptance of the plea deal. Everything else stays the way it is. When we go and look on the site, they do not have the hearing scheduled, although all news media is reporting that it is on the schedule for July 2nd. It's not uncommon that the Idaho site wouldn't have it up yet because, like, everything does get delayed a little bit. The statements from the family are fast and furious right now. The Gonzalez's in particular, it actually put out a statement immediately. This is just one post that I saw. Well, the Gonzalez family themselves have been very vocal about their displeasure with the prosecution in how long things are taking, how Bryan Kohberger has all the rights and the victims aren't being considered. They speak often and strongly against what is happening in this trial, and they are very displeased about a plea deal. The Gonzalez family, like the other families of the victims, received notification from the prosecution's office as required in regards to the plea deal and the process. And they confirm here in this tweet, it's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected, and we appreciate all your love and support. They're heartbroken. I think that it's just the fact that their voices aren't being heard enough. They really wanted the death penalty, and they were happy the state was still going forward with it. They were pleased that Judge Hippler left it on the table. I don't know why they wanted to go through a trial. Maybe they want Bryan to suffer. I would imagine that could be part of it. Having lost their daughter, all the victims' families having lost someone so close to them, you don't want any sympathy for the perpetrator. You don't want to show any empathy. You don't want them to get any kind of consideration. Because after all, They didn't have any consideration for the life of your loved one, for how you would feel as the family left behind, right? You know, they're notified, maybe. I don't know if they're consulted. They don't really have control over the situation in that way. Although their voices will be heard, in their opinions will be taken into consideration, they don't get to make the decision. The state does, as far as offering. In that's hard. For You can put yourself in the family's position, how hard that is to accept. Zana Kernodle's aunt has actually made a post on X that said that she's going to contest it and fight it. Although I'm unable to find a vehicle on how she can do that. They can petition to Judge Hippler their opinion. They can go to the hearing and ask to be heard. And they can bring a case forward. Okay. If the judge will hear them. He can only take it into consideration. It's still his decision. They don't get to make the decision. The family doesn't get to accept or reject the plea offer. The family doesn't get to say, don't offer a plea offer or offer a plea offer. Those are all decisions that are only made by the state. They can petition the judge because he is the final say on whether this goes through, whether it's reasonable for the state and justice for the victims. So it would be reasonable that he hears what they have to say. But it doesn't, he still is the deciding factor, not the families. And that's hard. That's very hard for the families to accept, and I understand that. I really do. I think we all do. We could put ourselves in their position. I would want justice. I would be somewhat appeased that he'd never see daylight, that he never gets out. But it would bother me, like it bothers them, that he is still breathing air on the same planet when he denied that air to my loved one. I think we can all put ourselves in the victim's family's position. It doesn't seem fair that we should have mercy on him when no mercy was given to our loved ones. This was an egregious crime, as alleged. It was a brutal slaying. It didn't have a motive. These were not aggressive people. These 4 children, these 4 students, young adults who had a long life ahead of them and great opportunity. There was so many kind things and wonderful things said about each and every one of them. A true loss to the community, the university, all their friends and family. Bright lights snuffed out. And we don't have a reason, except for the fact that one person may have decided that this was something they wanted to do. You can understand how the family can't accept it. Well, we'll have to see what happens on Wednesday. If, for all of us, if that hearing will be broadcast, you bet we'll be live to give you all an area to discuss it and watch it happen, to feel for the victims' families, to support and to watch justice in all the really odd, weird, magnificent ways that it rolls out. I have no idea what's going to happen at that hearing. I don't know if Bryan Kohberger will be required to allocute to the crimes or speak or even say anything. We don't know if he's going to have anything to say for himself, offer any words to the victim's family. Maybe at the sentencing hearing, which is proportioned to be, if this is accepted on Wednesday by the judge, is said to be done and dusted by the end of July, if at all during the trial period, which is coming up. We won't have long to find out. What the sentencing will be a formality, because it will be life in prison if the plea deal goes through. But it will be the opportunity for all of the victims' families to to actually make their victim statements, their victim impact statements, which is a very important part of our justice system. I know, Liz. I never thought so. I never thought also, because he seemed to feel so justified in his studies of criminology and all. And I even had some doubt based when actually, to be honest, when the defense pressed so hard that all of his peculiarities were due to the autism spectrum, I had some doubt that maybe they were judging him a little too harshly until I started looking at some of the evidence on the Google searches and looking at the cell phone data. You know, they can say all they want, well, you can't pinpoint him to the area at exactly that time. Well, a new video actually surfaced from one of the homeowners in the area that actually shows that Elantra, or one that looks almost exactly like it, actually casing out the house the night of, and then actually going towards the house, and then actually beat feeding 20 minutes later or during the window of the crime at a very high speed, actually taking the corner so fast they almost crashed. All very damning, maybe circumstantial, but still very damning. And then, I never really did understand the defense's alibi, to which, like, well, Bryan Kohberger just likes to drive around at night. Well, yeah, well, why would he turn his phone out during the window of the crimes when every other night of the week, when he's out stargazing, so to speak, he doesn't do that? You see, it's a change of behavior. And it's actually what we don't find that actually points to him being the main suspect more so than what they do find. It's the fact that the knife is actually missing, but they can show that a knife, very much like the wounds, and possibly also for the sheath that they found at the crime scene, was actually ordered by Bryan Kohberger. And then it cannot be located. He doesn't have it. But after the crime, he actually tried to reorder it again. He actually had it in his cart and he was going to send it to his parents' house, allegedly. But then he canceled the order. Maybe that looked too sus to buy it a second time. Make them doubt, maybe that would lead them to ask where the first one was. But he liked that knife and actually thought about replacing it. Maybe he thought that if they asked him where it was, if he showed them that he had it, he wouldn't be a suspect. I guess he's forgetting that the internet remembers everything. And Google knows everything you do, unfortunately. Like many of the cases that we follow, it will be in our digital footprint that each and every one of us leaves every second of every day on this planet. Kind of scary to think about all the cameras out there, and our phones knowing everything that we do, our search histories, even if we delete them, still being held somewhere that is subpoenaed, it could be accessed. Kind of really, ugh. Well, that's what most cases are based on these days. Can the judge just overrule the plea deal and sentences as he sees fit? Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, I don't think he can overrule a guilty plea and say you're going to death anyway, because it's not part of the plea. I think he can say that they won't allow the plea deal because and go for trial. But that would be an extraordinary event. And I don't see how he would be able to justify it by law, because it's not really taking the state's interest into consideration with the expense and actually having to prosecute. And he would actually have to say that he actually doesn't have faith in the case, that they might be accepting a guilty plea on somebody who's not exactly guilty. You see, the judge's job is to make sure that Bryan Kohberger understands the repercussions of the plea deal, that he understands what he's actually doing and pleading to. And I can't see how he would not think it does not serve the purpose of the victims by getting a guilty verdict and life in prison. They may want the death penalty, but is that actually justice when the state and the people, you see, the judge works for the people of the state of Idaho, not the prosecution, so to speak, and not the victims. He needs to balance the two in the needs of the people of the state. And do the people want to feed Bryan Kohberger, while he waits for a death penalty anyway, and get involved in all of those court fees and filings? After all, the state is paying for his defense as they appeal over and over again, and as all of these delays happen. Do they want to put out the expense of a trial? Is that fair? And is it reasonable if we're going to come to the same guilty plea anyway? We're going to come to a guilty verdict based on the evidence. Because the family is just upset that he's going to still be alive. Maybe they can put some kind of restrictions on his life in prison. I don't know. Maybe there will be something on that that'll come up in the hearing, and we'll find out more. Right now, this all just broke. There's not a lot of information. I know. They don't want to feed him for the rest of his life. And I understand their position, the families. It's not fair that he lets to live and their family member didn't. We all could understand that, right? Like why they would be so upset. Exactly, Liz. How no blood was found in that car? Perhaps some type of protection and stripping down of the clothes and everything before he got in. I don't know. Maybe in allocution, there's going to be many things that this is going to prevent us from knowing. I'm trying to make sure that I haven't missed any questions. I am sure also, Liz, that they want to know why he did it, and I'm hoping that there will be a formal allocution at sentencing. Or sometimes there is. Many of us have watched like shows like Law and Crime, where when there's a guilty plea, the victims do get to hear them say exactly what happened and why. It's part of the plea deal. I guess it'll be up to whether the prosecution presses that, whether the families make their voices heard into what they want, besides just the fact that they don't want him to live. But there's not going to be a plea deal to be put to death. That's not going to happen. That's something the family has to accept. That if the plea deal gets accepted, it takes the death penalty off the table. That is why the defense and Bryan Kohberger are agreeing to plead guilty, because Bryan Kohberger doesn't want to face a firing squad or lethal injection. That prospect obviously terrifies him if this is what he's willing to do. Hey, Jean. Or so much more. So let's just talk about like what happened in Pennsylvania today. Many of those witnesses are going to have to testify. Well, it did come to light that a lot of witnesses in this case don't want to testify. They don't want to be part of it. Part of the evidence that was given in the Pennsylvania actual hearing today for the witnesses rather, was that Bryan Kohberger's own sisters were fired just for knowing him. Why would we want to testify that we knew him or that we had any kind of relationship with him as a childhood friend or that we worked together or I was his coach for wrestling? Like, they're all worried about what the trial and being part of it is going to do to their lives. They don't want to be seen to take one side or the other. Most of them are just saying they don't want anything to do with it. It tells you how much sensationalism is around this case. And also how egregious and horrible the charges, the actual incident itself is. The loss of the 4 lives, the scene. It was said to be a absolutely gory, horrible scene. So So at that hearing, there was, in particular, I have a few of the names. There was uh, Brandon Andriola did the most testifying about what it would do to his family and his job, and how he really didn't have anything to do with him anymore, and what would it pertain. Doesn't see the reasonableness. But these are all witnesses that the defense really wanted to put forward as character or as things that had happened, and also the prosecution. There was also Jesse Harris, who was a boxing trainer, who knew Kohberger as a teenager. Okay. He expressed doubt that there's any value to his testimony at all, as he just actually did a boxing training thing, and this was a program that Bryan Kohberger was involved for kids that couldn't do actual sports. Well, that it wasn't active competition or anything that was like, one-on-one competition in scales. It was a feel-good sport, so to speak, of inclusion. Then there was Ralph Vecchio III, who never even interacted with Bryan Kohberger, but feels his life will be torn apart because his father owns the dealership and he works there now, where the Hyundai Elantra was actually bought, and doesn't see why he should have to testify since he had no interactions. There's a correctional officer who has agreed to, was also scheduled to appear in court, but it's been moved to July 7th to determine if his records admission requires him to actually be there to present some kind of record of what happened while or while Bryan Kohberger was in Pennsylvania custody. Anthony Soma agreed to testify, but he didn't speak at the hearing. Ann Poppin was an advisor from Kohberger's high school days. She agreed to testify and didn't have to come to court to do it. And then there was Maggie Sanders, who I'm not sure of her relationship. Well, she has a hearing and it was postponed by a week. She does not want to testify. And they want to know what the value of her testimony would be. These hearings took place all while in the background. A plea deal was actually being discussed all over the news and everywhere. But, they've got to actually go forward with all of this. Because until everything gets firmed up on Wednesday, either a yay or a nay, we could still have a trial if Judge Hippler doesn't agree that this is in the best interest of all involved. Hey, Rick. Man, Grace, are you talking about tacos? Tacos are good. Tacos are for Tuesday, though. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. You think they could sue for that, but I don't know PA laws on that. Sue for what? Let's see. Sue for him get not, for accepting the plea. Is that what you mean, Mrs. Cassandra? Are you talking about the families? Exactly. It's not fair for the fam. Oh, you mean the sisters getting fired from their jobs? Like they didn't want, like, it depends on the kind of jobs they had and the businesses. I don't think that was fair since they didn't do the crime. It was him. But it's the sensationalism, and it is the media, and it is the focus of it, that most businesses were worried about. Unfortunately, there's more victims here than the victims who unfortunately were murdered. There's no other word for it. Murdered, you know, too soon. Just way shouldn't have happened. They should still be here. But there's a lot of victims involved in this case. If all of the family who loved them are victims now, they have to live their life without, they have suffered because of the deed that was done, you know. And then there's even Bryan Kohberger's family, his mother and his father and his sisters, who have to suffer living in a community that knows what he did. And if this plea deal goes through to where he's actually saying he did it, it kind of gets worse for them. They have to accept that. The victims' families have to accept that. It's really going to be hard. Yep, just having that last name. Exactly, Mrs. Cassandra. Especially there's so many people that knew him for so long. I'm I'm sure he did, especially if he did this. Yep. Mm. Taco salad is good for any night. You're right, Jean. Taco salad is excellent. I like that. Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you have a brother-in-law with the same last name? Mm. So fortunate, Kim, because this case is like like I can't imagine a place that doesn't know about it, you know? It's funny because like I don't really talk to my family about true crime, but my daughter was visiting today and she said, "What are you doing later?" And I told her about that I was doing P. Diddy because of the case. And she said, "You know what you really should do? You really should talk about that other one, that Kohberger case." And I was like, "Huh?" She knew all about it. She knew all about it. So all of a sudden we're having a discussion on evidence and everything. And then a couple of minutes later, I get the message from Mrs. Cassandra. Thank you very much about a hot press release in an article that just blew my socks away. And everything changed. And then I'm messaging her. Oh, by the way, Kohberger just is considering a plea deal. And she was, like all of us, rather stunned. Did not think that was possible because the defense was doing everything they could to delay the trial. For them, when you think about it, for the defense, it's kind of a win not to have to go to trial because that's what you want for your defense. When you're a defense attorney, you do not want your client to have to go to trial. You want to get them the best deal possible if they are guilty without a trial, or you want to go to trial with the best defense and get them off. There's only two real options for a win for a defense. Yeah. But oh my. So I do have a couple of articles for you guys that you might want to read later. This is an article on the PA hearing, the Pennsylvania. When I say PA, I mean like the state of Pennsylvania where he was arrested, where his family is from, where he grew up. Remember, he was arrested at his parents' house. Yeah. And then this one. This is an interview with another thing that has hit the media lately, has been an interview with the two friends of the victims and the actual renters. There was five girls who rented this house together, and three of them are no longer with us, but two of them are still alive and are going to be witnesses in this trial. But they had two friends come over for discovering of the body and the calling of the 911 call. And this is actually a first interview with them that just hit the media. Um, they're going to be testifying also. That I've also put in the Discord and circulated around on the socials is the actual DoorDash woman interview going around, and also her police footage of when she got pulled over for a driving incident, and said that she'd be testifying in the Kohberger case. Like big news. The leaks that are happening in regards to the evidence have actually pushed the defense for them to try to say that they needed the continuation and that things were happening that weren't fair, that he was being tried in the public. What is true is a horrendous crime. And we do know a lot about the crime. We do know something about the evidence. And every time anything comes out about it, it's big news and sensationalism. Um, Anybody that hears about the case, if they think the case is flimsy, they still don't think Bryan didn't do it. I don't know. I don't see a lot of support for him out there. Because of the heinousness of the crime, I guess. It's you want a fair trial, you know. Well, isn't it fair if he's going to plea? That's kind of a win for everyone involved in a no-win situation, right? Because I mean, it's not going to bring back the victims. It's not going to ease the pain of the victim's family. But perhaps a plea deal will allow them to move forward. It will definitely put an end to the case. It will actually close it out, remove it from the media as much, give them the time and the space needed to heal. No longer waiting to see him in court or to go through the pain of hearing about the evidence and hearing about what's done, leaving it open for any kind of mistakes that could be made. And wouldn't it be horrible to have it appealed or to have a not guilty verdict? I hope that the families are actually weighing all that out before they do their petition to the court. Because we've seen in several trials lately that things go wrong. Late filings, witnesses just disappearing or not able to testify, evidence getting thrown out. What happens if the case falls apart? What happens if the jury sees it different than the rest of us? Going to trial is a risk. As solid of a case as you think you have, you still have 12 people you don't know going to decide how good that evidence is and whether it plays out for them. And they have the opportunity to actually disregard any evidence that you put forward if they feel that they should or they could, or they just don't understand it or don't think it's relevant or don't think it makes the point. In the best cases, you don't know what a jury's going to do. And I hope the families will consider that also. At least he will be allocuting to the crime. There'll be no more doubt who did it. There'll be no more looking for someone else. He did it. Hopefully he'll say why. Not that that's going to help. Don't change the situation, but it can help everybody move forward, right? Yeah. Will we be able to see the discovery? Not if there's not a hearing, because all we get to see is what gets presented in the court. No trial, no discovery. Of course, there has been some released already in affidavits, and it'll depend on whether the case stays sealed or if they let it all out. It's going to be part of the judge's decisions. They could. We could, if he allocates, possibly, allocutes rather they allocute is actually saying what happened and why. They actually say what they did. Mrs. Cassandra, part of the plea deal is that there'll be no appeal whatsoever. It's part of it. He accepts life in prison, no opportunity for parole, no opportunity to appeal anything. So, no, that would be off the table. After the plea deal, there would be no appeal. Yeah. For us, wanting to see the rest of the evidence and all, I mean, we didn't get to see the whole case anyway, only the stuff that they objected to. Most of the evidence we know about, it was because the defense filed all of those motions to try to suppress everything. And part of the motions would have to be to, put that evidence stuff in there. So before everything got sealed and redacted and this and that, a lot of us got a good bird's eye view if you took the time to read the thousands of pages that the defense filed. Oh, which, yeah, I'm that nerd. I did. So, yeah, all the Google searches, everything, there were supplies that were bought, that are considered to be part of the used in the crime, so to speak, for cleanup or cover up, or etc. Um, there's plenty. A lot of it computer activity, a lot of it cell phone data, GPS from the Hyundai, uh, a lot of camera footage from cameras all over the neighborhood before and after the incident, you know. I think so. Maybe. Do you mean about not being able to see all of the rest of the evidence? I don't think it matters that much if we actually get a guilty verdict, right? Because then the evidence doesn't even come into play. Hey, Pete, I know. We don't even know if it's going to be a fact until Wednesday, but it's everywhere, right? And I don't think it would. Yes, he's very pissed. I saw the post uh, on on X, and I'm sure there'll be interviews all over until Wednesday. I just hope that the judge will hear them. I hope they do a petition to the court on Wednesday, and the judge will hear them. But they can't stop it. Yes, he can, Pete. It is in the control of the judge, not the family. The family didn't even get to say whether they should all go for a plea or not. It's all up to the state. They do get their voices heard and how they feel about it, and what they would want, but it's not their decision. They can't stop it that way. But Judge Hippler can take everybody's opinions into consideration and do what he feels is best for everyone. But he's got to balance the victims and the state in the defense, the whole thing. He has to balance it all. And uh, a guilty a guilty plea is a good compromise. And most judges will go with the compromise, but we'll have to see on Wednesday. I mean, crazier things have happened in this case. I mean, George Hippler is no fan of all of these extra papers and filings and motions and all these delays in this trial. And he, from the start, he said he wanted this over. That it is taking too long and it needed to move forward. And if he feels that this is justice, I could see him accepting this deal. I know they don't want to compromise, because, and I understand how the families feel. Oh, Pete, I said that in the beginning. You had to wait 3 years, and then yep, no trial. Victims' rights, yes, and I understand how the families feel, that they don't think it's justice if he's still breathing and their family members aren't. Okay, but life in prison, no parole, no ability to appeal. It's a win for the prosecution. So, you know, I know. But victims' rights, I hear you. The families don't want to don't want it. And I understand how they feel. It doesn't seem fair that he gets to live and they're not here. Their family members are gone. They want no empathy, no mercy, no sympathy for him. And I can truly put myself in their position and understand exactly where they're coming from. It doesn't seem fair. But it is how the justice system works. They get to say how they feel, but they don't get to veto it. No, I mean, not if the family is not satisfied. I know what you mean, Pete, that it's not actually a win for the prosecution. The families that they represent, that they're supposed to be getting justice for, are very upset with the prosecution for even offering the plea deal. And I get that. They don't think it's justice. They don't think it's a win. They think it's a failure on the part of the justice system. And they are voicing their opinion about it very loudly. And I hope that the judge gives them an opportunity to have their say in the hearing on Wednesday. I hope they petition to the court to be heard, because it's his decision. So they need to talk with Judge Hippler, not the prosecution, not anyone else. to the man who's going to make the decision. Let them know what it means to them if this goes forward so that he can balance it in his decision and take it into consideration. It is hard. What's been happening in the prosecution lately in this country has been rough. I understand, Pete. I totally get where you're coming from. I still do have faith in our system, though. I'm a diehard, you know. But I have suffered from that numbness myself lately, Pete. Very much so. It does get to be disheartening when you see just things go absolutely haywire and stuff tossed out for the most ridiculous reasons, you know? Yeah, I get it. I do. Well, I think on that, guys, I'm going to end this. Tomorrow we'll do P. Diddy, you know? Tonight you also have an interview over on East Idaho News with Lori Daybell, who also is trying to get a new trial because, well, Judge Bareski is prejudiced because he made her like defend herself while sick, even though he ordered an evaluation to see how sick she was, and they said she really wasn't that sick, you know. But hey, I hear you, Pete. The case was all about direct evidence, not circumstance. It is. When they talk about DNA and the vehicle, yes, and the Google searches, yep. The circumstantial evidence I talk about is like the fact that he turned his phone off, even though like they ping him to the towers all around before and after. You know, very suspect behavior and stuff like that. Very circumstantial, but there was enough. I do agree with you. I think they had a really good case. I absolutely do think they had a good case. And I get what this means, all of this. Like I can understand what that is. I do. Uh, Believe me, we are all kind of reeling from this surprise, and I actually really feel for the victims' families right now, how upset they are. And I do hope that Judge Hippler will hear them and take into consideration their side. But like I said, the way the justice system works, it is his decision. And he has to weigh it out for everyone involved. As much sympathy as we have for the families, and we do. We absolutely do. You know, I'm just hoping that whatever happens, everybody can move forward and healing can start to happen. Yeah. But we'll see. Crazier things have happened. Well, I don't know if he's going to accept it on Wednesday. None of us do. The defense doesn't, the prosecution doesn't, neither do the families. George Hippler won't know till he hears all sides. Yeah. But I know people want answers. I know the family needs answers. And I hope that part of it will be allocution so they get some answers and can move forward. Either way. Well, I think right now he's reeling, but based on how he has been in the past, I would imagine he may be doing interviews. But I do hope he gets to speak with George Hippler. You mean Bill Thompson? Yeah, yeah. I guess if he could actually get a guilty without having to present that case, I could see why he's doing it. Don't be ripping up any tree. I hear you, Pete. Though I do. Yeah, you know what, Pete? Take a run, but I feel you, and I'm not disregarding your frustration at all. I think many of us here in the chat feel it too. We really do, and we feel for the families. A lot of times that's what it is here in my channel. It's about the victims and the families and what they have to go through. And it's about the system itself in how the judges have to actually balance what's good for everyone. And sometimes there's always going to be someone disappointed. And I'm trying to find a way that the actual defense gets disappointed in this too. Maybe they will have to make it a very strict imprisonment. Maybe getting him confined or something. I don't know. I hear you. I hear you, Pete. It's going to take a lot of overhauling to make it any different. But on that, I'm going to end this one. That's our hour. I hope to see you all tomorrow for some P. Diddy and Wednesday. Like I said, if we have the ability, like we have with all the hearings, to do this live, we will definitely do it live for you all to give you a place to hear so your voices can be heard too. And we will see what happens, whether the victims get to speak at that hearing, which I hope they do. I hope they do petition the court for that. I mean, like I said, they don't get to say yes or no, but they do get to have their voices heard, and it should be part of the process, especially in the accepting of the plea deal, that is taken into consideration. And I would like to see that play out for everyone. Yes, and especially for the families. All right. On that, good night, everyone. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow. Pete, hang in there. Get a good run. We feel you. We feel all of you, and we feel for the victims right now. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, everybody. And if you need to, get to the back of the comment sections and just let it all out. I hear you. I feel you. And this is a place for you to be able to say it. So go for it. No one's going to judge you. Just be open to the other side. You don't have to agree. Or be kind to each other and support each other. Say what you got to say. And I'll see you all for this case on Wednesday if they put it out. Because even if they don't put it out publicly, we will be talking about it. We will get whatever clips we can together of it, and we will be talking about it Wednesday night, come hell or high water. All right? On it. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining me. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for P. Diddy. Sorry about the mass rechanging of schedule again, but this was important. This was big, and we've all been following this together for 3 years. So this was huge. We'll see you all tomorrow.